of the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library. And before I introduce Marie Pella, our wonderful executive director, um, I want to thank you for all for coming and supporting the library. I am thrilled that the San Francisco Public Library has been such a fabulous institution and that we are able to put together events like this where we invite authors and are able to really hear their perspectives and thoughts behind the books that they write. Invited the two brilliant authors, Mitali Perkins and Roshani Chokshi, today because I, for one, am always curious about creators of brilliant stories and characters that say something about our world today, especially in a YA setting. So, and I'm sure a lot of you are curious about it as well. And secondly, I think both the authors have fascinating perspectives about diversity in characters, especially characters that the audience today or the readers today of YA books can relate to. So I cannot wait to hear more, and I would like to pass it on to Marie, the Executive Director of Friends of the Library.
Thank you, Sapna. I'm really excited to kick off what is our second Library Laureates virtual salon. My name is Marie Sapella. I am the Executive Director of Friends of the San Francisco Public Library. And before we begin, I just want to express our thoughts and prayers for India and to acknowledge the extreme concern for our families and friends around the world, and really the gratitude that we can gather here now to share the power of writing, to express culture, identity, and how we can all come together in this continuing struggle. So Friends is a nonprofit library organization that has been here since 1961. And we serve what I call us the life partner of the San Francisco Public Library, and we work to build that exceptional library. And we've been doing that for about 60 years now, as you can see in our logo. We're celebrating our 60th. We really believe in the power of libraries to promote equity, providing free access to information, resources, and opportunities for everyone to thrive. We're advocates for strong public funding. We raise money for the private sector to invest more in our libraries, additional needs, and champion the democratic values of our libraries. So by being here, you are supporting this incredible mission, and we thank you for purchasing tickets and for for possibly making a donation after or during the event. And if you do, you're supporting our public library to achieve its mission of ensuring that it has the resources at hand as it continues to play an incredibly important role in the recovery from COVID. And it's very exciting that tomorrow is actually the first day that the main library will begin a limited reopening, because we're going to start seeing the libraries rolling open over the next 6 months. I'll be putting the website in the chat so you can learn more about us, including things like our book program and our writers residency as well. So I want to thank Sapna. She was really the person who came to us and said, I want these two incredible writers. She put together the concept behind this, and we invited Mitali and Roshani, and they said yes immediately. So thank you, Sapna, for hosting, and to Cristina Mitra, who I'm going to introduce you to now, who is our San Francisco librarian. And she will take over the show with our incredible authors. So thank you so much. So Cristina Mitra loves serving San Francisco and the city in which she was born, raised, and currently lives. Standing on the shoulders of her working class Mexican and Filipino immigrant ancestors, she has worked for San Francisco Public Library since 2011, first as a children's librarian, and since 2015 as the Family Engagement Coordinator. As a curator of youth and family programming, she leads with a passion for uplifting BIPOC voices, which she also brings to her work as a children and youth YA lit reviewer for Kirkus, young adult fiction for Kirkus. So welcome, Cristina.
Thank you so much, Marie. I am thrilled to be here. As a children's librarian, we are always being asked, what are the great stories? What are the next most awesome authors to be able to recommend to our families, to our diverse readership? And it's incredible to be here with Roshani and Mitali, who are just honestly two gifts to children's and YA literature today. So it's my honor to be here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and then we'll kick off for a really exciting discussion. So if you don't know yet, Roshani Chokshi is the author of the instant New York Times bestselling first book in the Pandava series, Arusha and the End of Time, and its sequels, Arusha and the Song of Death, and Arusha and the Tree of Wishes. She also wrote the New York Times bestselling YA books, The Star-Touched Queen, The Gilded Wolves, and the Silvered Serpents. She studied fairy tales in college and once had a pet luck dragon that looked suspiciously like a Great Pyrenees dog. The Pandava novels were inspired by the stories of her grandmother that her grandmother told her, as well as Roshani's all-consuming love for Sailor Moon. Please give some snaps if you love some Sailor Moon. Rosh lives in the South, and although she doesn't really have a Southern accent, which you'll all be able to confirm soon, she does like to say y'all. Welcome, Roshani. Mitali Perkins has written many books for young readers, including Between Us and Abuela, winner of the Americas Award for Children's and Young Adult Literature, You Bring the Distant Near, nominated for a National Book Award, and Rickshaw Girl, adapted into a film by Sleeperware Productions, all of which explore crossing different kinds of borders. Mitali's work explores poverty, immigration, child soldiers, microcredit, and human trafficking, thanks to living overseas for many years and studying political science at Stanford and public policy at UC Berkeley. Her goal in her writing is to make readers laugh or cry, preferably both, as long as their hearts are widening. Mitali is just outside San Francisco, living and writing in the East Bay. Welcome, Mitali, and welcome, Roshani. We're so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Mitali and Roshani, we are just so excited to talk to you about your wildly popular coming of age, fantasy, and adventure novels, as well as your personal journeys as writers. In the audience today, we have many different flavors of fans of your books, including lovers of YA, aspiring young authors, and the parents of aspiring young authors. So to my audience, I welcome you all. Please note that there will be an opportunity at the end to ask Roshani and Mitali some questions of your own. So all you have to do is click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will be collecting those questions. And if we have time, we'll be very excited to share them with our amazing authors at the end. So to start off, I want to acknowledge we are here with the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library. So obviously this is an audience of library lovers in the room. And most authors that I know do have some place in their heart for libraries and are even fanatical library lovers. So I'm hoping that each of you could share one of your favorite library stories or a memory of a library. And I'll just leave it up to you who wants to start off.
Can you hear me? I realized I was on mute. So I was very much the sort of kid that was obsessed with portal worlds. Like that idea, the Chronicles of Narnia, that, if you just open a wardrobe at a certain time, you will land into this beautiful wintry wonderland that's beautiful, and hopefully Mr. Tumnus does actually look like James McAvoy. That would be nice. So when I was in the library, I think I looked at every single book as a key, and I'm sure that many of us do feel that way. Books are portals. They let us access certain worlds. We live 1,000 different lives. But I was a bit of a monster, and I was always like pulling books off the shelves, thinking that if I did it at quite the right time at midnight or something, it would just swing open, and then I could meet James McAvoy or Mr. Tumnus, either one. So that didn't happen, but it was a bit of a menace. I did try to put the books back. I don't think I did it very well.
Yeah, he did play a good Mr. Tumnus. I'm usually curmudgeonly about adaptations and who plays whom, but I did like that role casting. That was a good one.
It was fun.
Well, for me, it was definitely when we first arrived in the United States. I was 7 years old, and we were typically fresh off the boat, very frugal family. We didn't own a lot of books, but my dad always took us to libraries. So first week we were there, I think we were unpacking. It was a hot day, and I was being a little bratty 7-year-old. So my dad gave my sister Sonali, two older sisters, Sonali, Rupali, and then me, Mitali. I gave her one of those dad looks and said, take care of her. So she took me by the hand and we went down the street to the Flushing Public Library. I'd never been. We'd been living in London, and my sisters and I would go to the library occasionally, but I'd never been to an American library. And walking in with my sister she took me to the children's section and told me I could bring 7 books home. So she signed me up for my card, and it just felt like every week we'd go, I'd take the books, and I used to climb out on a little fire escape outside my window in that apartment, and I always ate sweet tart candies while I read. So for me, it was just it was my place I would go to get that fix that would bring down all the anxiety and stress of the fights. And I could be a feral reader. There was nobody guarding my reading. I could just bring home whatever books I wanted. So it was a sense of freedom and faith that a lot of these heroes' journeys had happy endings, so mine would too.
I love that.
I love that so much, the idea of feral reading and also just wildly bringing, books off the shelf and leaving them, just asunder. I think that's just incredible. Mitali, because we do have primarily a Bay Area audience, I'm just curious, do you have a favorite Bay Area library that you like to go to?
Yes. Well, the Bay Area is we're so blessed to have so many great libraries. So one of my favorite things to do is whenever I go to a town, maybe it's Los Altos, maybe it's Oakland, I like going into the local library, and I like to go to the new bookshelf because you get a real sense of the vibe of the community based on what the librarian has curated to pick for his or her community. So I really love going into different libraries all around the Bay Area, and you get such a sense of who lives there, who reads there, and who the librarian is serving. So I do love that. But my local library, we just moved in the pandemic. So thus explains the shadows under my eyes. And I haven't even had a chance to go to our local library yet. So I'm waiting for that moment when I can discover what people are reading in my community. Yeah.
Such a great point about the new bookshelf. It's just really could be your first landing place when you come into a library. And we're very excited that we'll be reopening our libraries very soon so that people can also experience that once again. So I just want to shift gears here a little bit and be able to, really start at the beginning, because I think that everyone loves a good origin story. And I think that understanding your origins as authors is very important to our audience, given, we may have aspiring writers here that are, really looking to you for some inspiration. So I'm curious about, when did you know that you wanted to write, and specifically write books for young people?
Oh boy. Well, for me, I feel like the moment I decided to be a writer or just a storyteller was when I did not get a letter of admission to a particular school of witchcraft and wizardry, despite showing up really resolutely at the end of my driveway every single day. I got super excited when I saw ravens in the branches. I was like, lo and behold, do you have an envelope for me? And then, they didn't. So that was fine. So I had to find some other way to be a sorceress. And what better way than to write stories, because they could make you feel something. They made you feel as though you traveled far and wide and, lived 1,000 different existences. And from there, that's actually how I got into fan fiction. I loved fan fiction growing up. I wrote fan fiction. It was all very bad. The very first book I tried to give to a literary agent in hopes that it would launch this, just meteoric rise to international stardom or something, was pretty much just fan fiction. So naturally, it didn't sell and nobody wanted it. That's okay. The important thing about it was it allowed me to play safely and happily in somebody else's sandbox for a while. And it was the thing that, fan fiction was the place in which I could actually self-insert. Because when I was growing up, and I'm sure Mitali feels the same way, we didn't really have the privilege of being able to see people like ourselves in stories. And so the way in which I could do that was just by writing the main character out, just being like, just kidding, she's an evil twin sister, it's me, and then like going wild with the story. And so that was pretty much my villain origin story. It's like many villain origin stories, it comes about from rejection.
Oh wow, what a likable villain! I'm rooting for the villain in this story. This is a very. Did you think that you were ever gonna? Did you ever dream that it would be a career though? Like, did you think this is gonna be my my gig. Was that
Oh
what
my
you?
gosh. No. And then I just made it worse. My parents are incredible people and they're immigrants in the Philippines and Indian. And so when I told them I was going to go to school and major in medieval English literature, I mean, the look on their face of just this is what we crossed oceans for. She's just going to go write about dragons indefinitely. And so, but they sent me off. They were very supportive. I'm sure my mother in the back of her head was just get a good MRS that's from college if that's all you're going to accomplish. But it ended up being okay. I did try the traditional things, and I was in law school for a year, and I actually absolutely adored it. But I just got fortunate with having written my first book around that time, and when it sold, my parents were so supportive and let me move back home to finish the second book, and I just didn't look back. From there, I was very lucky to be able to support myself based on that.
Oh yeah, that's so similar. I tell people that there were three career options for us. There was engineer, doctor, and engineer. Those not writing books for young people was not on the list at all.
Yeah.
So, and your parents do sacrifice a lot, and they come here and want you to they say no to themselves so that they can say yes to you. And
Yeah.
then you don't have the luxury that people who didn't have parents that sacrificed do, to say, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
But by some miracle, here we are, getting to do the thing we love as a living, which to me always seems like a huge miracle. But I made a distinction between being a writer and being an author because I always wrote. I always loved words. I just played with words all the time. And I read voraciously, as I said. So I knew the power of words, and I just loved to play with words. I have diaries and stories from when I was 9 years old, 8 years old. My voice hasn't changed that much. But then to have the nerve to say, no, this is going to be my career.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until my second book. My first book, I won a contest. Woohoo! I got a little check, took my parents out to dinner. Still didn't tell them maybe this is going to be the gig. Because I didn't believe it was either until my second book was rejected. Christina, you've heard this story before. My second book was rejected by 23 different publishers, and it didn't come out till 12 years after my first book. And so it was in that time period where I kept going back to that book, to those characters, to that plot, and I kept, by some miracle, just was resilient enough to stay with that story. That's when I thought, maybe this isn't just a hobby. Maybe this is a vocation, a calling, something I was put on the planet to do. So, and then when the book finally came out, I decided if that book can be as resilient as it is, I should probably be all in too. And I thought, well, I'm going to go for it. And then I just went for it after that.
I love that. I love that.
Wow. I mean, each of you have just spoken to just the journey from, I love how you described that, Mitali, from being a writer to being an author. And I'm just, so many of the course of our lives are influenced by pivotal moments, right? And you both write about that, obviously, in your characters, whether that's turning on a magical lamp and, everything that ensues after that, or immigrating to a new country. And so I'm just curious if you can just bring us back to, some type of pivotal moment when you saying yes to something set you on your course to where you are now.
Well, for me, it wasn't yes, as in somebody had offered me something and I was giving an affirmative about a choice. It was more just like yes of acknowledgement. So Mitali, I love how you and your sisters all have like rhyming names. It's delightful. In my family, I'm the oldest, so Roshani with a silent A, and it's Roshani if you're also a brown immigrant or I'm in trouble. Otherwise, Roshani is fine. I've got a baby brother named Jayesh. He could very easily go by Jay for the rest of his life. And our sister's name is Monica. Like, why would you do that to us? It's just the ultimate act of disrespect to saddle me with this name that people would pronounce as Roshani Chokshi for every single like day of homeroom for the rest of my existence. And you give her Monica? Are you serious? And on a slight bit, it's not fair that she could like go to Disney World or Disneyland and like have cute souvenir things. And then I'd be like flicking the thing, trying to find something, and she'd pull out Robert, and that's all I got. But the reason why my sister has the name Monica is because of a scary family secret, actually. When she was born, she was very, very sick. And my parents thought that we would lose her and I would never have a baby sister. So my grandmother said to change her name so that death would not find her. And that's really creepy. And it also sounds really, really disorganized. If you're the Grim Reaper and you're out there with your social security check number being like, that checks off, address is right, name's wrong, I'm out. I just want to watch like Great British Bake Off anyway, peace. So I remember being asked, like, is that story true? Yes, that story is true. And yes, I do not know my sister's real name.
Oh my goodness. Roshani Chokshi.
Roshani Chokshi here.
That sounds
She's
Polish.
not. I don't know her.
That sounds Hungarian or something. It's hilarious. Oh wow, what a great origin story for your sister to have her secret name. So
Yeah, I've jumped on her bed once at 4 a.m. and I used my Gollum voice and I was like, tell me a true name, like that. And she like kicked me in the face. She's also bitten me many, many times. I haven't.
I'm a youngest sister, so I understand how to resist the bossy older sisters. Yeah.
You guys are the worst.
Well, it's really best to be the youngest sister because your parents are all broken down by the time you get to be a teenager.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
So much easier on you. Then that's what I loved my sisters breaking down my parents. So
my siblings are so lucky that I did all the things that they wanted to do, so therefore they could do those things.
Yes, and the other reason is because when your older sisters are getting in trouble, it's really good entertainment to watch. So that I think it's fun. I think I got the best birth order. Yeah, my oldest sister's name Shonali means gold, and then Rupali means silver. So then I came along, and first of all, everybody wanted a boy, so everybody cried when I was born. And then they named me Mitali, which means friendly. So that now, see, I have to live up to this. My sisters just get to be precious and sit around, and I have to live up to this. I can't be a curmudgeon because my name means friendly, so I have to be smiling all the time. But and the other moment of fame happened when I was born too, because I was really late coming out of my mom. My birthday was yesterday too. I was just with my mom.
Happy belated.
We were remembering that when I was born, my moment of fame was that I was born in Kolkata, India, where birth weight averages are like 6 pounds. And I think I weighed like 12. So I actually made headlines that said, fattest baby ever born in Kolkata, India. That's my origin story. That's my moment of fame. It's all downhill from there. So I don't even know why I'm telling this story though. I forget your original question. Cristina, bring me back.
It's okay. We are getting so much love in the chat. People are loving the origin stories of names. Someone feels validated by not being the only one who got kicked in the face by a sibling. So the audience is with you. Trust. But I think that, let's keep going with it. But, honestly, my question was really about a yes moment. But I think that, so if there's something that comes to mind there, please share.
I think looking back, sometimes I think, I should have studied English literature, or I should have gotten my master in fine arts and just hung around with writers all the time. And if I thought I was going to be a writer from the start, I might have followed that path. But I'm also very grateful that I studied what I did, because I learned about a lot of international justice issues and poverty. And those were things I really cared about academically. And then when we lived overseas and I worked with refugees and learned about human trafficking, and those were things that I was able to explore in my fiction. And we write such different fiction. When I'm listening to you, Roshani, I'm thinking, my gosh, her brain, I could not, you invented worlds in the last 10 minutes as we sat here. And I'm thinking, and I'm trying to imagining your parents, the Filipino side, and I'm trying to imagine the contemporary, how they met and all this stuff. So definitely realistic fiction here. But I got to explore a lot of things in my fiction because I said yes to the non-traditional writer path, which is just to live the life of following things that I was interested in, where we visited the refugee camps along the Thai-Burma border. I lived in Chiang Mai for 3 years, which led me to write the book Bamboo People. I worked in Kolkata in anti-human trafficking organizations, and it was in India that we were able to adopt 2 beautiful twin boys. And that was it, led me to write Forward Me Back to You, which is about trafficking and international adoption. So I'm glad I said yes to a wide life that led me apart from just the traditional, here's how you become a writer. because I think in our fiction, even if we're writing fantasy or contemporary fiction, whatever, all those threads, are pulled in to the story. So I'm glad I said yes to things that had nothing to do with writing.
I think what's so beautiful about what you both shared about your origin stories is that, what you said yes to ultimately led you here. So even if you don't know exactly where the journey is going, studying medieval English literature, studying political science, and now that has obviously, fueled you to be incredible fantasy writer, contemporary fiction writer. I mean, it's just, I think certainly I'm taking from this that, whatever you say yes to ultimately does make you the person that you are, and brings you to where you're meant to be in a certain way. Well, something, even if you both are very different writers in the sense of your genres, something that you do have in common, and certainly not the only thing, is your South Asian heritage that you share. And so, not to generalize at all or to draw, some kind of generic, uh, you know, commonalities there. I would love to hear, and I'm sure our audience here would love to hear, how that has informed your writing, your intersectional experiences, which I think both of you write about.
Well, for me, I grew up in the South, in Georgia. I've lived in Atlanta for the most part of my life. Um, but I'm, in addition to being Indian, I'm also Filipino, and so a really big thing that I've always been drawn to in stories, and especially I think fantasy does this so well, it explores what it means to be on the outside. In fantasy, one of the most common tropes is that you are far more exceptional than you think, that there's something special about you. And I know that as writers, we very much recoil at this idea of the special snowflake syndrome. But when I was a kid, I desperately wanted to be a special snowflake, because I'd basically been told my whole life I don't look Indian enough, I don't look Filipino enough. Um, I didn't speak either of my parents' languages because they didn't teach it to me or my siblings, not wanting to confuse us. And so my link to both sides of my heritage, in addition to the food, which was just extraordinary and remains extraordinary, was through stories. And it was through folk tales, it was through ghost stories, monsters, myths, legends, gods, goddesses. And the most amazing thing about the more mythology that you read, and honestly, the thing that made me want to study medieval English literature, because it is very much the study of fairy tales, was the fact that they're all the same. You can spin a globe and you can put your finger on it, and wherever you land, assuming it's not like Antarctica, but I don't know, maybe seals have their own origin stories and their own version of Cinderella, you will find a version of something that resembles Beauty and the Beast, something that feels like Cinderella. And I'm using like Western examples here, but what a lovely and humbling thing to know that no matter who you are and in what time or where you are, we all want the same things, which is just to love and be loved, to find a place in the world, and to have the horror of something like grief or tragedy or whatever, to be able to explain it away through the power of mythology. So I think that my upbringing as someone who's Indian and Filipino really gave me a greater appreciation for that.
Yeah, I'm remembering reading Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment as you're talking. I read
Mm-hmm.
that when I was parenting because I remember how the boys loved Grimm's fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
And I read them in the original and to the boys, and they would love the ending where, the wicked stepmother had to dance in red hot shoes until she was destroyed. Like they loved those violent endings to the villains because
Oh yeah.
it's so satisfying about evil really getting trounced and
Yeah.
evil having the last word that was such a part of those stories. So yeah, it really satisfied the boys' souls now.
I
That
love that.
yeah. Yes. So I get so interested in what Roshni's saying that I completely forget the question. This is really bad. Let's see. What's the question?
So it's honestly something very general about your South Asian heritage
Oh,
being,
heritage, right.
yes.
Yeah. Right. So I was very much, I grew up as a code switcher because, my family was village. They came, both my parents grew up on jute farms and they lost the jute farms in partition, escaped to India as refugees, lost everything, and then came to New York, Flushing, Queens as immigrants. And then we moved to California in seventh grade in the middle of the school year. And I like to tell everybody that if your life is a hero's journey, then seventh grade is when the plot gets really strange, like it gets thick. Because for me, I was the new kid, and in that school, in that suburb, there were no other people born outside of the USA except me. And so I was really trying hard to fit into that middle school. And it was the stories that were giving me the courage. Looking back now, I think I went and got a curling iron so I could curl my hair back so I would look like one of the Charlie's Angels, which was a big TV show back then. But I mean, I was brown. What was I thinking? But I just didn't. I just tried so hard to crack both codes. So at home, we were traditionally Indian Bengali family, which means you take off your shoes. Your father comes home from work. You greet him on your feet. You there's just all these different codes. You eat with your right hand, all these different things that I did at home. And then, of course, at school, I had to figure out that whole code. But what the great thing, I put a lot of that in my fiction, the idea that code switching is really the best way to live. I think we should all be code switchers. I feel sorry for people who grew up monoculturally because what happens is you get this great flexibility of being able to crack codes for the rest of your life. It's like learning a language when you're a child. Your accent's going to be much better than people who learn the language as an adult. So even if you're a global adult and you travel widely, it's not the same as growing up with two languages and two cultures and two heritages and two codes. So wherever I go, I really still have a little bit of that superpower in my brain. I'm so grateful for that. So a lot of my books are about that crossing borders back and forth. I love to explore borders especially between power borders, people who lack power, people who have power. I really just love when people meet across borders. That's fascinating to me.
That's fantastic. I do want to recognize that we just entered into May, and May is Asian American Heritage Month, and a time when, not the only time, certainly, we get to do this every day of every part of the year, but it's a time that we do proudly spotlight the richness and beauty and diversity of Asian American Pacific Islander cultures. And certainly here at San Francisco Public Library, we're about to embark on a whole month of special programming, making sure that just the beauty and the beauty and diversity of these cultures is really spotlighted. And in this last period, we've seen a spike in anti-Asian racism, and I'm curious about your perspective as writers of color, as Asian American heritage writers. How do you approach your storytelling in the kind of context of where we are, not only currently but also historically, in terms of stereotyping and the racism that we know has existed and unfortunately it has been showing itself on the rise?
Well, in my perspective, I think the most magical thing about children's literature is that it's an automatic dose of empathy. And I think at least when I'm writing, I try to write from that perspective of almost just aggressive defiance. When I was growing up and on the occasion that there were, books about people of color, they were almost always filled with just like suffering. It's just like, have a healthy dose of suffering where you must feel so bad about the position that you're in. And you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to eat this grief nonstop. And I personally can't do it. And I think that's why Arusha is the way she is. I think that's why I wrote the romances the way that I did in the Star-Touched Queen and the Gilded Wolves. And what I want for kids when they read that is just to take away a sense of joy, that what they look like, who they worship, or any of that, it's none of that excludes them from the ability to be the hero or heroine of their story, or to have a wild and fun adventure. And to me, that's the only way I know how to beat back against hate. That's all.
Thank you so much for that, Rosh. One of our audience members is quoting children's literature as a dose of empathy with a big heart. So that is definitely resonating with our audience here. What about you, Mitali?
Yeah, I'm looking at the fake shelves behind you, Cristina, that are hopefully we'll be able to access soon. But that to me represents what stories can do. If you grow your imagination as a child, you imagine other lives. You imagine living in the skin of another person. What better way is there to make? One of my books is called "You Bring the Distant Near," because it's based on a Tagore poem line about how how the distant can become near and can almost become a family member. That the poem, and that's I think what stories do is they bring the distant near, and they make them makes you feel like you can have this dear friend and this person in the story. And um, so I think the more stories that we read, the more lives we inhabit, especially in childhood, because that's when we gain that. It's like sport you play as a kid or language you learn. Back to that, if you do it as a kid, there's that elasticity of imagination that lasts you for a lifetime. So I would say many stories. I always say that's my strategy. Is just many stories, all of them flawed in some way or the other, but just feed a child's soul with as many stories as possible, because the imagination then takes charge and becomes the story is really shared between the writer and the reader. And so an astute reader is not going to, the flaws are not going to get in the way once they're many storied. It's just going to be the child reader is going to be in power of that story. That's my goal, and that would mean crossing many borders, all different kinds, to imagine other lives.
I remember in You Bring the Distant Near, there's one of your characters who I just love, Sonia, and she's kind of falling for or interested in someone who's reading more nonfiction and like a college student. And then he says to her, but fiction changes hearts. And that just totally stood out to me, because that's personally why I'm more of a fiction reader. Is I love kind of having my heart be opened wide by whether it's fantasy or contemporary fiction. And I'm sure there's lots of people who also feel that way in our audience today. We're getting a lot of hearts and smiles, emojis from the chat. So thank you everyone for just really engaging in this discussion. I know we can't see you right here, but we feel you and we know that you're with us. And so if there are some questions that you have that are stirring in your heart that you want to make sure to ask our fabulous authors here today, we will be answering those shortly. So I am curious, you said something, Mitali, about, befriending or, these characters. And so just kind of like digging into, both of you have written a prolific amount of books. And I'm just curious about like, who are the characters that, you really kind of hold most dear? Or is there a particular character that you wish you could befriend?
You mean by written by other people or by?
Oh, of your own writing or each other's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see in the comments a couple of our guests have said they reread Arusha, and I think that is such a compliment when somebody tells you that they go back to that story, and they name the book by the character's name, and that's why they're reconnecting with that story. And I have an annual rota of reads that I come back to because of the characters, and so to see your readers say, I reread so I can spend time with Aru again, I mean, that's just such a high compliment.
Oh, yeah, that's very kind. I think I did give Aru a lot of myself. When I was in middle school, I was just this monstrous child. But I gave it to Aru, and so that's nice. But I think of out of my other characters, the one that's the most autobiographical is actually in the first book. It is in the Star Touch Queen, and it is a flesh-eating demon horse named Kamala. And I remembered that as I was writing, I thought it would be fun to write myself in, but I didn't think that I could really pull off the princess gig. It just sounded like a lot of people judging you all the time. And then the villain thing just sort of fun, but again, like a lot of brain power. So I realized that where I really just exist on the scale of humanity is this chaos neutral thing. So I wrote myself as this demon horse that's friendly, but also constantly trying to derail the plot in search of food. And that's really just all that she says. And she was my favorite to write.
A flesh-eating horse who tries to derail the plot in search of food. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Epitaph. That could be your epitaph. She was a flesh-eating horse who derailed the plot in search of
My
food.
husband would completely agree with that description, FYI, as I've been on deadline and he's just been like leaving plates of food outside my office and running away as fast as he can. He's like, don't touch me, don't bother me, don't eat me, just leave. Let me leave you to your dark bidding. I'm like, okay.
Lots of plates of food outside your door. That's so romantic. That's like a real winner, man. Keep
I got dumped out of the Zoom.
Oh.
Hello, Michael.
Oops.
Hi, Kim.
Michael.
Hi, Kim. Kim, your volume's up.
Well, I am seeing in the chat, we have so many of our audience members are saying how much they love Arusha. They want to be friends with Bryn from Arusha, how much they love You Bring the Distant Near. So you both have such incredible fans here. And we are going to transition to Q&A. So I would love to ask our audience members, please submit some questions that you'd like to ask our amazing authors here. And I will ask another question while you're all thinking about a question that you might want to ask. And remember, just go ahead and put that in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we get that here. So, we know that we have some aspiring authors that are here in our audience. And so as a librarian, I'm curious about what ideas you have for how me and my colleagues can inspire the next generation of great writers.
Ooh.
Well, I can start first if you want, and I think Roshani has some good questions going. There's some questions in the Q&A already that your people are asking you, so you might want to peruse those. But anyway, I'd go back to that many story thing. I think one of the things that I think there's this fear of stories wasn't around when I was my fearfully reading. My librarians just let me loose without a lot of curation, almost just gave me many stories and trusted that my imagination, that there was a power to that. And so I would say just to continue to provide a wide realm of stories. There's all different kinds of readers, and they're going to find their way to their favorites. And the stories that we live intersect with the stories that we love. And so because we're each leading such different heroes' journeys ourselves, we're going to come to different stories that we love. And the key sign for me is when someone tells me they reread a book that I wrote, I feel as I said before with Roshani's book, that to me is a story that they love, that's a keeper, because they're going back to it again. And that's going to be different for everyone. So I'd say just keeping on putting all those different kinds of stories on your shelves, and just not being I think the danger of a single story is something we've heard from the novelist Chimamanda Adichie. The idea that you have one South Asian book, so you've covered that culture. But I think just having many stories from many people, many voices is just a great way to go. So support the SFPL that's putting more books on shelves. That's the way to go.
Absolutely. I also really love when librarians do this almost blind date with a book sort of thing, because one of the ways in which a reader can feel seen is not just like who they are ethnically, but also just like, if you took a BuzzFeed quiz and your Greek goddess is Persephone, this is the book to read. I would be like, ooh, really? That's me. I'm going to find myself in this book. Something fun like that, because everybody loves to see themselves in stories. But most importantly, we really love, or at least speaking for myself, we love that pizzazz of exception, that somebody has witnessed us in a different way and speaking to, like, I don't know, some version of ourselves that we hope others might see. And so that's always a fun way to discover books.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to turn to our Q&A, and we do have some wonderful questions that have come in. And so from Zoya, which book are you proudest of writing?
Well, for me, the book I'm proudest of writing is my second book, which is called A Crown of Wishes. It is probably my least read book in the entire world. And I'm so grateful that I got to write it. But for me, that was the book that taught me that I could write, through the noise. Because after your first book comes out, and it's a huge privilege, it's a huge honor, all of a sudden there's people who think, they assume they know what you're going to write next. They assume what kind of writer you are. They assume the sort of questions that you're interested in answering. And for me, that was a lot of pressure. And so writing A Crown of Wishes and learning how to write for myself was endlessly invaluable. I mean, I think Mitali hit on this perfectly. One of the burdens that we have as writers of color is that people who are starved of that representation can't help but want to see themselves subconsciously reflected in our work. And when they don't, oftentimes they can be disappointed, or they can say that we have failed them or something else. But as an artist, you have to write for yourself. You have to delight yourself first and foremost, because when that story is out, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the rest of the world.
Well said.
Absolutely. I think that shared power of story is so important. People always say, well, what do you hope your reader gets out of the message? I'm like, message just doesn't belong to me. Message belongs to the reader. I have no idea what this reader is going to get out of my book. I've had letters come that just say, I got this out of your story. I'm like, really? Oh, wow. That's interesting. So, yeah. And my favorite, or the book that I'm proudest of, I guess, is Rickshaw Girl. And I think it's because, well, I no longer have my daddy on earth, but it was his favorite because it explores the idea from my culture of origin, takes a hard look at the preference for sons over daughters, an economic preference, and how my dad had 3 daughters. And everybody cried, as I said, when I was born. But my Baba always said, no, a daughter is just as good as a son. And he was always so proud of us, invested in us wholeheartedly. And so in that book, I got to have a father say, a daughter is just as good as a son. And that was in honor of my dad. The other thing about that book I love is that I wrote it as the daughter of a Hindu landowning family that exploited Muslim workers on our jute farm. And so there's a big rift between the girl in the book who's a Muslim rickshaw puller's daughter and me, an educated landowning, from a Hindu family. It's as big a gap power-wise as a white person writing about a black person so it was, but I got a free pass there in America because I'm culturally, I speak the same language, but I always knew in my gut that it was a big power jump. And so the book was read in Bangladesh and somebody really loved it there. And it was written to a screenplay by a Bangladeshi Muslim writer and acted, directed, produced all by Bangladeshi Muslims. And it's now going to be released in a film version. You can find out more about it at rickshawgirlmovie.com. But the fact that my parents' ancestors and their ancestors would have hated each other, and now they took this little story of mine and they're making it into this full-fleshed, wonderful adaptation. And there's a great sense of peacemaking that's happening around that book from the ancestral past that I find so delightful.
I love that.
I cannot believe that we're nearing our end. I feel like we could go for another hour and just kind of keep going with you all. But I'm going to ask each of you a specific question about your books, and then we'll wrap up with one more question. So for Roshani, Ovia is asking, in the Arusha series, which Pandava sister would you be?
Oh, I've answered this before. I gave Aru, just most of myself. I really did, especially her penchant for word vomiting. When I was starting 9th grade, I was just I am an extremely awkward person, but I'll tell the story really, really quickly. I started 9th grade and I was super excited because it's the beginning of high school and all these big things were happening. And I was like, this is the year that I'm going to get my braces off. They lied. I didn't get my braces off for another 2 years, but I thought I was going to, and that was important to me. And I remember hearing about this boy that was moving into our neighborhood, how good looking he was, how smart he was, and how not smart I was as I was pulling in C grades or whatever. And I was really annoyed at this person for existing. But then I saw him on the first day of school, and the sun was shining and the wind was blowing and he was beautiful, just gorgeous. Anyway, I screamed at him across the sidewalk, "Hey, you, I know where you live," because I had watched his house being built all summer long. And that was bad. That was really bad. We carpooled every day for a year and he didn't talk to me. But last month we did celebrate our 2-year wedding anniversary. So it turned out okay. But that was a long answer of Aru.
You heard it, folks. It's Aru.
Wow. Amazing.
No, God, it was traumatic for him. I literally Edward Cullened the poor guy, but that's okay. It's fine.
And Mitali, the question I was going to answer you, it looks like you were able to answer. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So just to wrap up, a lot of people have been asking, and of course, as a librarian, I'm always curious, what are you reading these days? What has your quarantine life been like in terms of reading, and any recommendations that you have for our audience?
Mitali, I'd love to hear what you're reading.
Oh my gosh, we just both met deadline, didn't we? I finished a deadline also. It's really tough to answer that question when you're writing because I can't read while I write because I get so affected by what I'm reading in the moment that somehow it's going to weave its way into my story. So I've been reading nonfiction. I just said I was on a 3-day retreat after I finished my deadline. I booked myself into a monastery for 3 days, complete silence, wordless retreat. Awesome. The monks just cook for you and then they don't speak to you. So so I did take some books on that. I took a book called Art, and I took Madeleine L'Engle's book, Walking on Water. I was kind of trying to look at the bigger picture of art and how somebody said art during the pandemic has been the second responder to people. And so I was trying to get fueled for the big picture of what I do creatively, you know, in the world of such need, to sit in front of a computer and try to meet a deadline while your husband's leaving plates of food. I hope my husband's listening outside. While your husband's leaving plates of food outside your door. So it's kind of self-focused. So I did get away to read some nonfiction about the big picture of art and how it serves the hurting planet. Yeah.
I love that. You're so cool. Can you take me to a quiet monastery too? That sounds amazing. What have I been reading? I also love nonfiction. I'm reading The Silk Road by Peter Frankopan. I'm very obsessed with The Silk Road. On the middle grade side, I'm a really big fan of a book that's actually coming out on Tuesday. It's called The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. It's part of the Rick Riordan Presents line. Honestly, all the books in that imprint, and I'm not just saying this, like they're truly beyond delightful. So I hope that you guys enjoy them. And I'm trying to think what else I've read, but that's kid appropriate. So no, nothing. I got nothing else. My Kindle is mostly romance. I love romance.
Fantastic. And just as a teaser, can you give us any hints for what's next for you or any of your characters?
Oh gosh, just pain and suffering for a lot of them. I am wrapping up 2 series for after 5-6 years or something of writing 2 books a year. And both series are coming to a close in 2021. So I'm just really overwhelmed, really excited, hoping I do it justice. But yeah, pain, suffering, etc. It'll be fine.
Fantastic.
Wow, I don't know how you do series. I'm so impressed with that. I actually have a nonfiction book coming out in August called Steeped in Stories, and it's a look at 7 of my favorite classic children's novels that I reread every year. You can find out more at steepedinstories.com, but I include Little Women and A Little Princess, and then The Silver Chair from the Narnia books, and The Hobbit. And it's a look at how I feel like they really formed me because I reread them so much. Mm-hmm. But also, what do we do with our flawed books from our aunties and uncles that spoke into our lives so much, but had big issues when it comes to colonialism and race and culture. So that book is coming out in August, and I'm excited about that.
Oh
Fantastic.
Gosh, the books your aunts and uncles would give you. Somebody gave me Flowers in the Attic and they thought it was about botany. I was 11.
They did not read the back.
Take it back.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for your open hearts, your insights, your stories, your journeys. We are huge fans. And if you weren't a huge fan before this, I know that you became an even bigger fan of these incredible women. So I just want to thank you so much for this thought-provoking and incredibly inspiring discussion.
Thank you so much for having us. Boy, I'm a Roshani Chokshi fan for forever now. So fun. And Cristina, you always do such a great job moderating. Wow. I just love your thoughtful questions. And thank you, friends of the San Francisco Public Library. We're so proud of you in the Bay Area. We're just rooting for the SFPL. It's such a wonderful place to go and be. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. I'd love to pass it back to Marie for our final wrap up and closing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. We could go for a lot longer. And Mitali, I'm a third of 3 girls too. And even in my time, I internalized that I should have been a boy my whole life. And somehow I had disappointed my dad. And then I had 2 boys and I realized he didn't care. So it was a bit of a relief. But just thank you, Sapna. Thank you for the brilliance of combining these 2 authors. And thank you, Kim Drew and Michael Vincent, who had been with our friend staff behind the scenes who planned this whole thing. Cristina, you were fantastic. Thank you so much. All I can say is maybe we'll find some way to do more, not only children's reading, but children's writing. And we can talk as the public library about some more children's writing programs, anything to get this imagination running wild. So thank you guys so much. Again, you can find out more about Friends and our amazing library, and join our movement of library supporters and lovers, and look at our website, and please keep your eye out for more of these Library Laureate virtual panels. We're trying to really, really highlight the best and the brightest in the Bay Area, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Amazing.